Welcome to the Dealmaking with Laura DiFrancesco podcast. I'm Laura DiFrancesco, your host. We're talking all about mergers and acquisitions, buying and selling small businesses, as well as corporate law. We are taking our experience closing over $10 billion of transactions since founding Dean Street Law 5 years ago, and my experience being an M&A and corporate attorney for over a decade and making it accessible to you as an entrepreneur. I hope that this helps you in navigating the complex world of mergers and acquisitions. And also, we're always happy to be a resource for you here at Dean Street Law. You can always apply to work with us through our complimentary consultations linked in our show notes. And a huge shout out and thank you to everyone who's subscribed and left us a 5-star review. If you haven't yet, be sure to subscribe and also leave us a 5-star review. It's one of the best ways to support us as a small business. And also be sure to share with your friends and colleagues on social media, through text, email, or however is easiest. It means the world to us that you're supporting our content and helps us make more to support you in your journey. Welcome, everybody, back to the latest episode of the Dealmaking with Laura DiFrancesco podcast. I'm so excited today to be talking about buying a healthcare business. So we've had on the episode so far buying a business in general, the timeline of buying a business, various aspects of due diligence, and now we're going to go through a couple of the most frequently asked industries that people ask about when they're buying a business. They say, do you have experience in manufacturing? Do you have experience in SaaS? Do you have experience in healthcare? The answer is yes, 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 and more yes. So we've done deals in most sectors, and we're excited to share today more about what are the implications if you're buying a healthcare business. So if you're new here, I'm the founder of Dean Street Law, the host of the Dealmaking with Laura DiFrancesco podcast, and also author of the new book, Entrepreneurship Through Acquisition, Buying a Small Business. So if you haven't yet checked it out, get on the wait list, make a pre-order. We also have the first chapter available for you as well. If you'd like to learn more about that, all of the information is linked in our show notes. So with that said, let's get started. We're going to be talking about basics of healthcare businesses, key differences between healthcare businesses and other different types of businesses. We're going to be talking about key considerations as well as what to watch out for. So let's dig in. A healthcare business can be anything from a nursing home to a pharmaceutical company to a medical telehealth. There's also been the rise of in-person V companies. There's med spas, and each of those is going to have different regulatory implications. So many different facets of healthcare are heavily regulated, of course, and that's going to influence the amount of regulatory risk that you have in buying the business, as well as your moats and your prevention from competition. So how hard is it to get into this industry is going to also impact, of course, your future success in the business. So different differences between healthcare businesses and other business types, first and foremost, is going to be the regulatory aspects. So because so many different aspects of healthcare, dentist office, doctor's office, med spas, all of that, they all have different licensing requirements, and that's going to influence the type of transfer of business that you can complete. So you have to work with your legal counsel, and we're happy to help you with this if you'd like. You're going to work with your legal counsel to determine, because this is different state by state, exact type of company, different company by different company, how the transfer of the business may occur. It may be certain types of professions, especially the medical professions, may only be owned by someone licensed, or the license may be held by the company itself. There's multiple different ways that it could go under state law. And then there also may be regulations around the transfer of business. It may also have government contracts. So those are all things that you're going to work with your attorney to determine the transferability of the business. That's going to be your number one priority as soon as you sign the letter of intent. What are the requirements for transferability? Now, because of that, you may be facing a long timeline to close. If you require regulatory approval or approval from the contracting parties or something like that, then you're going to have to build that into your timeline, and you're going to be adding third-party approvals into your acquisition timeline, which may mean that there are certain elements of the deal that are going to be out of your control. Now that's kind of like the two sides of a coin, right? You're going to have the benefit of it's hard to get into this business and it's hard to compete with this business. Likewise, it's going to be more challenging for you to get into the business, but of course, an established business is going to be a lot easier than establishing a business of your own, particularly in these types of industries. That's why you see so much mergers and acquisitions in the healthcare fields. In addition, they may have complex revenue systems, and we've looked through a lot of different payer contracts, hundreds and hundreds of them, and we have a really good understanding of insurance contracts and government contracts for reimbursements and everything. So you're going to want to understand how their revenue systems work and what, if there's been any trends or anything, you'll have those conversations either pre or post LOI with the seller about any impacts to revenue collection and revenue systems based on changes in government programs or insurance, etc. And sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes you might also think of how this business might be impacted by public policy. There are certain federally and state funded healthcare programs. And so if that funding is currently a more generous revenue aspect of the business, you want to consider how likely is that to change with administrations or policy changes, etc. And then in addition, it is very, very important your human capital, your resources, human resources, they are a fundamental component to the value of your business. I like to say at our team at Dean Street Law and my companies that I own that we fall to the level of our systems and we rise to the level of our people. And that could not be more true in a healthcare profession. I say that at Dean Street Law because we are a skilled profession, and it's certainly true with healthcare as well. And you may have more relationship-based employees as well. If someone's been working with their doctor for 20, 30 years, that may cause a disturbance in the transfer of the business if your seller is also the key provider of the business. So you want to have an understanding of how transferable are those relationships, and then also what are the relationships with team members as well, because understanding those team member relationships can be really helpful for you to understand the dynamic of the culture of the business and how likely it is that they're going to continue working with you post-closing. You may also introduce different ideas for retention bonuses, or we even have some clients that are working on creating employee stock option programs. There's a lot of in between that you can discuss with your attorney as incentives for team members to be continuing on with the business and minimize the likelihood of disruption due to changes in your team members. When it comes to navigating corporate law, entrepreneurship, and managing small businesses, experience matters. Dean Street Law is a boutique corporate firm specializing in mergers and acquisitions and additional focus in real estate, commercial transactions, finance, and corporate governance. With over $10 billion in deals closed, Dean Street Law has extensive experience representing hundreds of clients in thousands of transactions, from small businesses to Fortune 500 companies. Whether you need startup guidance or advice on closing multi-million or multi-billion-dollar deals, we're your trusted partner every step of the way. Visit deanstreetlaw.com in the show notes to schedule a complimentary consultation. The next part we're going to talk about is the key considerations. We talked about licensing and regulations. That is going to be highly influential on not only how and when and if you can transfer the business, but in particular, the details around that, the mechanisms, the nuances that you'll need to transfer licenses, certifications, anything else. So those are going to be a key component that you'll work with your attorney on. And then the second that we talked about is financial health and payer mix. How resilient is this business to changes in payer mix? How diversified are their income? Is all of their income coming from a single government program, or are they really well diversified? Those are going to also influence your considerations for the value of the business. So these may come from private insurance, Medicare, Medicaid, out-of-pocket expenses. When it's out of pocket particularly, you have to think of, Is this a business that would do well in a recession? Med spa in particular, right? That's elective procedures rather than necessities. So you want to think through the economic pressures and how they might influence the business. The next item, which is really important, it's a component of regulations, but deserves its own topic itself, which is patient data and privacy, and the systems and processes within the business. HIPAA compliance is fundamental to every healthcare business of every sort. They're getting classified confidential information, and there is a very high burden of compliance with HIPAA compliance, privacy, and policies around that. So understanding, is this all paper from the 80s? What are the systems? So as part of your legal due diligence, we as your attorneys are going to be looking into their HIPAA compliance, their patient privacy, their overall policies, standard operating procedures. But those are questions you can ask initially too, if you have the time. Listen to our podcast episode on due diligence. I talk all about how much you can front load due diligence and how much you can't front load due diligence. You want to make sure you do your own due diligence, absolutely, but it's going to depend on how much time and competitiveness you have pre-LOI and whether it's going to be better to save more questions for post-LOI and lean more into financial due diligence to come up with a purchase price pre-LOI if it's a very competitive situation. So those are a couple things. In addition, we're also going to be looking into third-party relations, your contracts, insurance providers, medical suppliers, pharmaceutical companies, and other healthcare businesses. A lot of those contracts are going to be much, much more complex and have a lot more nuance around transferability and everything than you would typically see in, for instance, a manufacturing company that may be operating by purchase orders and good faith supply orders, less so contracts that are going to influence the transfer of the business. So with that said, things you're going to want to watch out for in this business is really understanding the type of business it is, its licensing requirements, and you can even ask the owner, what type of license does it hold? Is it the business itself that's licensed? Is it the providers that are licensed? And if they know anything about the transferability, that way you kind of get ahead of these. Even if those are immediate post-LOI questions, we're going to be asking them. So the sooner we can get questions, our responses on those, and then obviously we trust but verify. We will never take someone else's statement as truth on those types of things. We're going to check on your transferability ourselves. You're also going to want to start, having, whether it be Google notifications or AI strategies where you have notifications about news and changing regulations, do an analysis on the regulation risk and how that might impact the business, that based on payers or structure and whatnot. And then reputation and legal risks. So malpractice and malpractice insurance is really important when you're considering a professional services company. And that's going to be something that we're going to be looking into. You want to understand their coverage of malpractice insurance and then how that is also going to be transferred. Are you buying the business? Most healthcare businesses are going to be a stock purchase because of those issues of transferability, the complexity of the contracts, the complexity of the employment relationships. Most of them are going to be a stock purchase. So you're looking more of change of control provisions and understanding, especially with their insurance companies, how is change of control going to work? Is there any issues? And you may even have the seller in certain situations have tail insurance that they also maintain themselves. That might be more of a situation where you're going to have an asset purchase, and for some reason, if you're able to do an asset purchase based on maybe it's a healthcare light business instead of a heavy healthcare business, then you would kind of consider whether tail insurance might be relevant. But you also want to look into their claims history, and if they have a lot of claims, look into their Google reviews. If they have a lot of bad reviews, where is that coming from? Litigation can be a really significant impact in a healthcare business. And then any sort of evolving industry trends such as telemedicine, digital health, value-based care models, any disruptions in the traditional healthcare business. For instance, we've seen after COVID, there was a massive spike in at-home care, and specifically whether it was injections such as an IV or fluids or something to have more health and wellness focus rather than an actual sickness or flu. Maybe just someone went out the night before, have a big day, they want to get an IV to be in peak performance or to improve their performance or to get rid of their hangover, right? There's multiple different trends that we've seen in healthcare, particularly in the advancement of wellness focus and preventative wellness focuses. So those are all things to consider when you're interested in purchasing a healthcare business. This is truly just the tip of the iceberg. There are so many more things that will come up in due diligence or things that we're going to need to consider. As soon as we have a deal that we're working on with you, if it's a healthcare business, any other type of business really, we're going to be looking into what are the specifics of this exact target company. What do we need to be thinking about? What are the risks here? How can we mitigate them? What questions do we need to ask? What are the factors at play here? And that's going to be especially important in a healthcare business, but also true for all businesses. So if you'd like to work with us at Dean Street Law, we would love to speak with you. You can schedule a complimentary consultation through the link in our show notes, link in our bio, and we look forward to speaking with you then. In the meantime, while you're searching, while you're hunting, while you're learning more, we would love to hear what else you'd like to hear on the podcast. Are there topics you'd like to learn about? Is there anything that would be helpful to you? And if you have a moment, please be sure to leave us a 5-star review. That supports our podcast and helps us keep bringing great content to you. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next episode of the Dealmaking with Laura DiFrancesco podcast. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the Dealmaking with Laura DiFrancesco podcast. I hope you found today's discussion insightful and that it brought you one step closer to mastering the art of mergers and acquisitions. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to follow and subscribe to Dealmaking with Laura DiFrancesco on your favorite podcast platform so you never miss an episode. And if you found value in our discussion, please leave a 5-star review. It would mean the world to us. And share this podcast with your network, friends, and colleagues. For more in-depth resources, be sure to visit our website, deanstreetlaw.com, where you can find articles, guides, and more information on our services. Don't forget to follow us on social media for the latest episodes, updates, tips, and exclusive content. You can find us on LinkedIn, Search Funder, at LMDFrancesco on X, and at Dean Street Law on Instagram. Join us on our next episode where we'll explore more deal-making insights. Cheers and happy deal making.